My name is Rose Bennett, and I live in a quiet corner of Marlow, a small town that feels stuck in time. I'm 68 years old, though I sometimes feel much older than that, especially when I look in the mirror. Maybe it's the weight of the years, or maybe it's the weight of the secrets and betrayals that have crept into my life. I'm a retired nurse, spending my days knitting, reading, and watching the seasons change from the comfort of my front porch. But my life, like so many others, was about to be turned upside down by a simple sound, the sound of a suitcase hitting the floor. So if you're watching, baby, go ahead and like this video, comment where in the world you're watching from, and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss tomorrow's story. 'Cause this ain't just my story, it's the story of too many women who had to smile through the silence. It was late afternoon, the light beginning to soften as the sun dipped behind the tree line. I had been folding Lily's school uniforms, neatly pressing them, folding them with care, when the noise came. It wasn't just any noise. It was sharp and sudden, echoing through our old farmhouse. It was the unmistakable sound of a suitcase being thrown onto the bedroom floor, and it made my heart skip a beat. I knew immediately that something was wrong. This wasn't the usual routine of packing for a business trip or a weekend getaway. No, this sounded different, frantic almost. And as a mother and grandmother, I've learned to trust my instincts when they tell me that something's amiss. I set the pressed white blouse down on the bed and climbed the creaking stairs, my slippers making soft echoes in the stillness of the house. The old farmhouse had its charms: high ceilings, a wraparound porch, and large windows that let the light in just the way I liked, but it was also full of the creaks and groans of old wood that I knew all too well. I reached Jared's bedroom, and his door was wide open, as if he didn't care who saw. Jared, my son, was standing in the center of the room, throwing clothes into a black duffel bag with a speed and urgency I had never seen before. He didn't fold them, didn't organize them, just grabbed and stuffed them in like someone running from a fire. His work laptop sat open on the unmade bed, several browser windows glowing with faint light in the dimness of the room. For a moment, I just stood there in the doorway, watching him. He didn't even glance up. "Going somewhere?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, even though my heart was racing. Jared didn't stop what he was doing. He just muttered, "Business trip. Last minute." The lie hung in the air between us like smoke. Jared worked as an IT consultant for a local service provider. He didn't go on business trips. In fact, he barely left the house unless it was to pick up groceries or fix someone's computer. I knew this wasn't right. "For how long?" I asked, stepping into the room. My hands were suddenly cold. "Not sure yet," he replied, and the words were so dismissive that I felt a chill run through me. He grabbed his toiletries from the dresser, knocking over a framed photo of Emma holding newborn Lily. The glass cracked against the floor, but Jared didn't even pause. My heart clenched as I looked at the shattered photo. Emma had passed away just a few months after Lily was born. That picture had sat in that spot for years, silent, constant. Every night, before Jared went to bed, he would kiss his fingers and gently touch the frame. Now he stepped over it, the image of his wife and his daughter broken on the floor, as if it didn't matter anymore. "Jared, stop," I said, my voice cracking. "Talk to me. What's really going on?" Finally, he met my eyes. The look in his gaze froze me. There was no guilt, no sorrow, no warmth, just cold determination, and something else I couldn't quite place. Almost like relief. "I'm leaving, Mom," he said, his voice emotionless. "Should have done this years ago." The words hit me like a physical blow. For the past decade, I had been the one raising Lily, holding our fractured family together while Jared worked through his grief. I had sacrificed so much, kept us afloat with my small pension, my love for Lily, and the belief that one day Jared would come back to us. Now he was telling me he was walking away, leaving everything behind. And what broke my heart even more was that he wasn't even looking at me as he said it. I was frozen in place, staring at him, struggling to find words. "What about Lily?" I finally asked, my voice small, almost pleading. Jared zipped the suitcase with a finality that made my stomach drop. The sound echoed through the house, probably reaching Lily's room, where she was supposedly working on her homework. "She's better off with you," Jared said, his tone flat. "She always has been." I wanted to scream at him, tell him he was wrong, that he couldn't just abandon his own daughter like this. But instead, I felt a rush of sorrow. Jared had walked out of our lives, but he had never truly been a part of them. He had been a distant father, a ghost in our home, always retreating into his work or his grief, leaving me to pick up the pieces. "You can't just abandon your daughter," I said, my voice rising, but Jared didn't even look up. "I'm not abandoning her," he said, his voice cold. "I'm leaving her with the person who actually raised her." The words were so cruel, so dismissive, that I didn't know how to respond. He was right, in a way. I had been the one to raise Lily. But it wasn't supposed to be this way. Jared walked past me, toward the stairs, dragging his suitcase behind him. I reached out and grabbed his arm. "Jared, please. Whatever's happening, we can work through this as a family." He shrugged off my hand like I was nothing. "There is no family, Mom. It's just you and Lily playing house while I pay the bills. Now you can figure out how to pay for them yourself." I felt a coldness seep into my bones. "What does that mean?" I asked, my heart racing. But Jared was already halfway down the stairs. I followed him, my feet dragging as if the weight of the world had settled on my shoulders. When I reached the living room, Lily was sitting at the old wooden desk, her face neutral as she glanced up from her homework. "Going somewhere, Dad?" she asked, her voice calm but sharp. Jared paused at the front door, his hand on the handle, looking at Lily. For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of hesitation in his eyes, but it was gone just as quickly. He opened the door, letting the cool autumn air rush into the house. "Just need some time away," Jared said, not even looking at Lily. "Mom will take care of you." "How long?" Lily asked, not skipping a beat. "I don't know," he replied, his voice distant, almost robotic. Lily nodded, as if she'd been expecting this moment, and I could see it in her eyes, a quiet acceptance that broke my heart. She didn't cry, and didn't beg him to stay. She simply nodded, the understanding between them more painful than any tears could be. Jared closed the door behind him with a soft click. The sound echoed in the stillness of the house, somehow louder than if he had slammed it. I stood there, feeling the weight of everything that had just happened, and watched as he drove away from the home where Lily had spent her entire life. The house felt empty now, colder. Lily and I stood in the silence, and for the first time, I realized how much of our family had been built on fragile foundations. The only sound in the house now was the ticking of the old grandfather clock in the corner, and the hum of the furnace as it kicked on. "Is he coming back?" Lily asked, her voice breaking the silence, but there was no panic, no desperate need for reassurance in her words, just quiet resignation. I wanted to lie to her, to tell her everything would be okay, that Jared would come back. But I knew she was too smart for that. "I don't think so, sweetheart," I said softly. Lily closed her algebra book with care, stacking it neatly on top of her other textbooks. She looked at me then, And in her eyes, I saw something I hadn't seen before, an expression that made me pause. She was only 14, but there was something older, wiser about her. Something that made me wonder if she knew more than I did about what had just happened. "Don't worry, Grandma," she said, her voice steady. "I'll handle this." I didn't understand how. She was just a kid. But the way she said it, so calmly and confidently, made me believe her. And for the first time since Jared walked out the door, I didn't feel alone. As I sat in the silence that followed Jared's departure, I couldn't shake the feeling of loss that lingered in the pit of my stomach. It wasn't just the empty space where Jared had once been, it was something deeper. Something that I had tried to ignore for years, because I didn't want to face it. But now, with him gone, I had no choice but to confront the truth. Jared and I had always had a complicated relationship. When Emma passed away, it felt like my son vanished into the shadows of his grief. I thought, at first, that it was just a phase. That he would come back to us, back to the family we once were, once he had worked through his sadness. But as the years went by, the distance between us only grew. It was like the man I had known, the man I had raised, no longer existed. I spent my days taking care of Lily, holding our fractured family together as best as I could. But Jared? He was always there, but never really there. He would sit in his room for hours, staring at his computer screen, working long hours for his tech support job, not speaking to anyone. He stopped sharing meals with us. He stopped talking to Lily, even when she tried to engage him. His grief had turned into something else, something colder, more distant. He didn't even want to be part of the family anymore. Instead, he buried himself in work. His job consumed him. And when he wasn't working, he was out late, sometimes not coming home until the early hours of the morning. It wasn't like him, but I couldn't bring myself to question him. Maybe I was afraid of what I would find if I did. And then, there was the guilt. I couldn't help but feel it, the nagging feeling that perhaps I hadn't done enough for him. Perhaps I hadn't been the right kind of mother after Emma's death. But what did it mean to be a good mother? I had done everything I could to keep us afloat, to keep this family together. My nursing job kept a roof over our heads and food on the table. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Or so I thought. Looking back, I can see now that it wasn't just the grief that took Jared away. It was the slow, quiet way he became someone I didn't recognize. And somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing it. I stopped questioning the man who had once been my son. I thought maybe he just needed space. But when I realized that space had turned into an abyss, it was too late. I was left picking up the pieces, trying to raise Lily and maintain some semblance of normalcy. But Jared, he had already checked out. And I had allowed it to happen. I told myself it was because I wanted to respect his grieving process, but deep down, I knew I was lying to myself. It was easier to let him slip further away than to force him to confront the pain. The first few weeks after Emma's death had been the hardest. I can still remember the day we buried her. Lily was only 3, and I held her close as we stood by the grave, surrounded by the cold, silent world. Jared was there, but it was as if he wasn't. I remember him standing in the back, hands in his pockets, his face unreadable. He didn't cry. He didn't speak to me. It was like the grief had encased him, locking him inside a shell he refused to break out of. In those early days, I tried to be strong for Lily. I told myself that she needed me more than ever, that I had to be her anchor in the storm. But what I didn't realize then was how much I had been carrying on my own, trying to hold us together while Jared fell apart. I didn't know how to fix him. I didn't know how to fix us. And then, There were the nights when Jared would sit at the kitchen table, his laptop open in front of him, barely acknowledging that Lily and I were even in the room. It wasn't just the emotional distance that bothered me, it was the physical distance, too. He wasn't present. He wasn't part of the family anymore. I tried to reach out to him. I tried to talk to him, to help him with his grief, but it was like talking to a wall. The man I had known, the man who used to laugh and joke with me, the man who once doted on Lily, was slipping away from me. And I had no idea how to stop it. I thought, maybe if I gave him space, he would come back to us. Maybe if I let him work through it on his own, he would find his way back. But as the months passed, it became clear that he wasn't going to return. And when he started spending more time with a woman named Vanessa, my suspicions grew. I didn't know much about her, but I didn't like the way she made him look at her, or the way his eyes seemed to light up when he spoke about her. It was a look I hadn't seen in years, a look of excitement, of passion, of something more than the quiet indifference he had shown to the rest of us. But I didn't ask about her. I didn't question it. After all, he was my son. And if he wanted to move on, if he wanted to start a new chapter, who was I to stop him? Little did I know, that new chapter would be written with lies, betrayal, and secrets. As Jared continued to pull away, I focused on Lily. She was my anchor now. I had to be strong for her, because she was the one thing I had left to hold on to. She needed me, and I wasn't going to fail her. I made sure she went to school, helped her with her homework, made dinner every night, and kept up the routine that had become the heartbeat of our home. It was all I could do to keep the walls from closing in on us. But Jared's departure shattered everything. And what made it worse was that Lily had been more in tune with Jared's actions than I had ever been. She saw it all, the late nights, the secrets, the lies. She watched him slip further and further away from us. And now she had started to piece together the truth I had ignored for so long. Lily wasn't just my granddaughter. She was the daughter I never had. The child I had raised when my own son couldn't, or wouldn't, be the father she needed. And I realized, maybe too late, that Jared wasn't just leaving us. He was abandoning everything we had worked so hard to build. And I had allowed it to happen. Now, with him gone, Lily was stepping up in a way I never could have imagined. I don't know what was harder, the betrayal of my son, or the realization that my daughter-in-law's absence had been replaced with the quiet strength of my granddaughter. But I knew deep down that this was far from over. Jared's disappearance had just opened the door to a storm I couldn't yet see, but one that Lily was already preparing to face. The night Jared left, the house felt emptier than I ever thought possible. The silence that once comforted me now echoed through the walls, a constant reminder of the cracks in our family. I sat in the kitchen long after dinner, nursing a cup of chamomile tea, trying to make sense of everything that had just happened. But no matter how many times I replayed the events in my mind, it all came back to one thing: Jared's departure wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of something much more complicated, something that neither of us could ignore. Lily had gone to bed early that night, but I noticed that she wasn't sleeping. I could hear her soft footsteps above me, moving back and forth in her room. The house was still and quiet, but her presence was anything but. She was always the quiet one, the one who observed and processed everything around her before making her move. But that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more going on in that room than I realized. Around midnight, I heard it. The faint tapping of a keyboard. At first, I thought it was nothing. But as I sat there, the clicking grew louder, more deliberate. It wasn't the kind of sound a teenager makes when they're scrolling through social media or texting their friends. This was purposeful, focused, like someone working on something important. I knew Lily had been quiet about what was bothering her. She hadn't cried, hadn't asked too many questions about her father's sudden departure. But I also knew Lily well enough to understand that her silence was her way of coping. And in her silence, she was watching, waiting, and thinking. I set my mug down on the table with a soft thud, trying not to make a sound as I moved toward the stairs. My heart raced as I reached the top, but I stopped at Lily's door. The light was on beneath the crack, and I could see the faint shadow of her moving across the floor. I hesitated, wondering if I should knock, but something told me she wasn't just staying up late to finish homework. I gently tapped on the door. "Lily?" I called softly. The typing stopped immediately. Then I heard her voice, calm and quiet. "Come in, Grandma." I opened the door slowly, stepping into her room. She was sitting at her desk, fully dressed, her school books scattered around her. But it wasn't the books that drew my attention, it was the glowing laptop screen in front of her. There were multiple tabs open, filled with what looked like spreadsheets, bank statements, and email printouts. Her concentration was intense, her brow furrowed as she scrolled through the information, one document after another. "What are you doing up so late?" I asked, trying to keep the shock out of my voice. Lily didn't look up from the screen. "Research," she said flatly, like it was the most natural thing in the world. She gestured to the papers scattered around her. "I've been looking into Dad's accounts." My heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean, looking into his accounts?" Lily finally turned to face me, her eyes cool but calm, as if she had already made peace with everything. "I noticed some things," she said, her voice steady. "Dad's been acting strange. I thought he was just grieving, but then I started paying attention. I found some irregularities." Irregularities. That was the word she chose to describe what had been happening in our household. My mind raced, trying to process what she was saying. "Lily," I began, my voice trembling, "you're talking about your father. Are you sure about this?" She nodded slowly. "I'm sure, Grandma. He's been moving money around. I've been tracking it for the past few weeks. I wasn't sure if it was just me being paranoid, but now I know." I felt a lump rise in my throat, and for the first time, I felt a wave of dread wash over me. Jared was hiding something. No, he wasn't just hiding it. He was actively doing something behind our backs. Something that had to do with money, and I didn't know if I was ready to find out what it was. Lily continued, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she opened more tabs. "Here's the first bank statement. It's from the account I set up for Lily's college fund. It had $43,000 in it. And now," she paused as she clicked a few more buttons, "now it's empty." I leaned over her shoulder, my breath catching in my throat. The numbers on the screen were crystal clear, and they hit me like a physical blow. 0. The account that should have been set aside for Lily's future, gone. "No, that's not possible," I whispered. "That account was protected." Lily nodded, her expression unwavering. "That's what I thought too. But when I checked the transaction history, I saw that Dad transferred it all out 3 weeks ago. Then he moved it to a different account. I'm still trying to track it down." I took a step back, my legs feeling weak beneath me. How did you even get access to this?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. "You don't know anything about banking or—" Lily looked at me then, as if she had expected me to ask this very question. "I've been learning," she said matter-of-factly. "I figured out how to track his transactions. Dad's not very careful with his passwords. He uses the same one for everything. I started looking into it when I noticed the strange withdrawals. My head was spinning. Lily, you. She cut me off, holding up a hand. Grandma, I know this is a lot to process. But trust me, I'm doing this because it's the only way to make sure we don't get hurt. He's been draining the accounts, and now he's trying to run away. He's planning something with someone else. I stood frozen, staring at the screen as if the numbers themselves could explain it all. But they didn't. They only raised more questions. Who is he working with? I asked, my voice shaky. Lily clicked through more tabs, then stopped, pointing to a name that stood out like a neon sign, Vanessa Torres. This is her, Lily said, pulling up a social media profile with a picture of a smiling woman in a professional outfit, standing in front of an office building. She works at Meridian Financial Services in town. I think she's helping him, moving the money around, creating new accounts. It's all connected. I took a step back, my hand going to my chest. What are you going to do? Lily closed the laptop, the soft click of the screen shutting making my heart race even faster. We need to act fast. I'm going to make sure he doesn't get away with this. I've been documenting everything, every transfer, every withdrawal. And I'm going to make sure the people he's stolen from get their money back. Lily, this is illegal, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. What you're doing? Lily smiled faintly. I'm doing what needs to be done. He stole from us, Grandma. And now, we're going to take it back. I had no idea what to say. My granddaughter, the same girl I had raised since birth, was planning to take down her own father. And she was doing it with a level of precision and confidence I had never imagined she had. I had always known Lily was bright, but I never realized how capable she truly was until now. Are you sure about this? I asked, my voice a mixture of fear and admiration. Lily met my gaze, her eyes full of resolve. I'm sure. I've already started. And just like that, I knew this wasn't just about recovering money anymore. This was about justice. And Lily wasn't going to stop until she got it. The days following Jared's departure were filled with a strange kind of numbness, a quiet disarray that hung over our home. My thoughts were scattered, but one thing remained clear. My son had done something unforgivable. And Lily, my granddaughter, had uncovered the depth of his betrayal. I spent the next few days walking through the house, my heart heavy with the knowledge that Jared had stolen so much from us, from Lily. I had tried so hard to hold everything together, to make our lives work despite the cracks in our family. And now, those cracks had widened into something unrecognizable. As much as I wanted to pretend like this was all just a mistake, deep down, I knew better. Jared's departure wasn't a sudden break, it was the final act in a much longer game. Lily, though, was different. While I felt overwhelmed by the enormity of the betrayal, she seemed focused, determined. I had never seen her like this before. Every day, after school, she would lock herself in her room, her laptop open, eyes glued to the screen. She was relentless, piecing together the puzzle that Jared had created and trying to understand the full extent of what he had done. And as the pieces fell into place, the picture grew darker with every passing hour. One evening, after a particularly quiet dinner, Lily called me into her room. She was sitting at her desk, her laptop open in front of her, papers scattered across the surface. I could see the exhaustion in her eyes, her focus, her determination. It was all-consuming. "Grandma, sit down. You need to see this," Lily said, her voice low, almost urgent. I walked over to her desk, pulling up a chair. She pushed a few papers aside and opened a new window on her laptop. The documents that filled the screen sent a cold shiver down my spine. The more I looked at them, the more the pit in my stomach deepened. Vanessa, I said softly, staring at the name on the screen. It was the same woman Lily had shown me before. What about her? Lily's fingers flew across the keyboard, bringing up more files. Vanessa isn't just some woman Dad's seeing. She's been helping him. But not in the way I thought. She's been running financial scams. They've been using our personal information, Grandma, yours, mine, even Lily's college fund. They've been stealing from us for months, if not longer. I swallowed hard, trying to process what she was telling me. It felt impossible. But how? How did they even get your information? How did they do this without us knowing? Lily clicked through several more tabs, showing me the depth of the scam. Dad set up fake accounts, forged signatures, he even took out loans using our names, applying for credit cards in both your and my name. He transferred money from our savings accounts and then moved it into offshore accounts. My chest tightened as the numbers on the screen grew clearer. The amounts were staggering, tens of thousands of dollars gone, siphoned off into accounts I couldn't trace. The mortgage payment, the credit cards, everything that we had relied on, Jared had drained it all. This isn't just a little mistake, Lily, I said, the weight of it crashing down on me. This is fraud. This is... I don't know what to say. Yeah, she replied softly, her fingers continuing to click. It's much worse than I thought too. I kept thinking maybe he was just taking a little bit here and there, but he's been planning this for a while. The worst part is, it's not just us he's hurt. Lily pulled up another file, and I saw the names of other people, older individuals. I read the bank statements, one after another. Their savings were gone, stolen, just like ours. Grandma, Lily said, her voice tinged with anger. He's been using our information to steal from elderly people too. People who trusted him. People who needed their savings. He helped Vanessa access their accounts and transfer the money into new ones. It's all here. Every single transaction. I stared at the screen, my mind reeling. How could he do this? He was supposed to protect us. He was supposed to be the father who would take care of things, not steal from his own family. He wasn't supposed to hurt people like this. Lily's jaw tightened as she pushed another document into view. It was an email thread between Jared and Vanessa. They were discussing how to hide the stolen money, how to cover their tracks. They knew exactly what they were doing, Lily said, her voice hardening. It wasn't just careless. It was deliberate. I sat back in the chair, my hands trembling as I tried to comprehend the scale of it all. My son, my flesh and blood, had become someone I didn't recognize. Someone who was willing to destroy not just his family, but the lives of innocent people for personal gain. The guilt that had once consumed him seemed to have evaporated, replaced by cold, calculated greed. But there was something else in Lily's tone, something that pulled me back to reality. As much as the shock and anger swirled inside me, I saw a quiet determination in her eyes. "What are you going to do?" I asked, my voice small, afraid of the answer. "I'm going to stop them," Lily replied firmly. "I've been collecting evidence. I've already contacted the bank and filed fraud alerts. I'm going to make sure Dad and Vanessa pay for what they've done. But we can't just wait around for the police to figure this out. We have to act fast." "Lily," I said, my voice breaking, "this is so much. You shouldn't be carrying this burden. I should be the one." "No, Grandma," she interrupted, her voice calm but fierce. "This is something I have to do. He thinks we're weak. He thinks he can get away with this. But he's wrong. We're not just going to sit here and let him ruin everything." I looked at her, sitting there, surrounded by documents and digital evidence, her face hard with determination. At that moment, I realized just how much she had grown. She wasn't just the little girl I had raised. She had become a force of her own, someone who wasn't afraid to fight for what was right. Lily wasn't just seeking justice for herself or for me. She was doing this for all the victims Jared and Vanessa had stolen from. And in that moment, I knew we weren't alone anymore. She was leading the charge, and I would follow her wherever it took us. "I'm proud of you, Lily," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "But this is dangerous. You need to be careful." "I know," she said quietly, but her gaze never wavered. "I'll be careful. But we need to make sure they don't get away with this." And just like that, I knew it wasn't just a matter of recovering the money. It was about more than that now. It was about holding the people who betrayed us accountable for what they had done. It was about ensuring that no one else would suffer the way we had. The journey ahead would be long, and I didn't know what it would cost us. But one thing was certain: I wasn't going to let my son, or anyone else, destroy our family without facing the consequences. The next few days felt like a blur. The house, once filled with the quiet comfort of a family routine, now echoed with the weight of secrets, betrayal, and the unmistakable determination in Lily's voice as she worked tirelessly. Every night, after I had tucked her in, I could hear her in her room, the soft tapping of her laptop keys, her deep focus radiating through the walls. I couldn't help but feel both proud and terrified at the same time. I had never expected Lily, at just 14, to shoulder such a heavy burden. She was still a child, and yet, she had become a quiet warrior, unwilling to let us slip further into the abyss her father had created. I wanted to protect her from all this. From the betrayal, from the danger that was sure to follow. But I knew deep down, there was no stopping her now. I had to stand by her, even if it meant stepping into a world I didn't understand. The world of digital warfare, fraud, and legal action. As much as I had tried to shield her from the harsh realities of the world, she had already seen too much. And now, she was fighting back. That afternoon, as I was sitting in the living room, trying to focus on the book in my hands, Lily came downstairs with her laptop open. Her face was calm, but there was a sense of urgency in her movements. I put the book down and looked at her. "Grandma," she said quietly, "I filed the fraud alerts with the bank. They've confirmed it. Dad's accounts are frozen. But that's just the start. We need to hit them where it hurts." I took a deep breath. "What do you mean? What's the next step?" Lily sat down beside me and opened a new document on her laptop. It was a carefully organized file filled with details. Bank statements, loan applications, forged signatures, each one linked to Jared and Vanessa's fraudulent activities. She had painstakingly pieced together everything, connecting the dots between their thefts and the victims they had targeted. I felt a tightness in my chest as I looked at the files, realizing the depth of the scam. This wasn't just about our money. It was about the elderly people whose life savings Jared and Vanessa had stolen, people who had trusted them. "This isn't just about recovering our money anymore," Grandma Lily said, her voice steady but determined. "It's about holding them accountable for what they've done. And it's about making sure they don't hurt anyone else." I watched her as she navigated through the documents on her screen, showing me each new revelation she had uncovered. "I've been researching Vanessa," she continued. "She's not just some financial advisor. She's been running these scams for years, using people's information to steal from them. And now, she's helping Dad hide it all. They've even been working together to forge documents, set up fake investment accounts. It's all here." I felt a lump in my throat as the weight of it all settled over me. This was far beyond what I had imagined. It wasn't just about the money Jared had stolen from us. It was about people's lives, their security, their futures. My son had become a part of something that had destroyed others, and Vanessa was the mastermind pulling the strings. What are we going to do, Lily? I asked, my voice trembling. How can we stop them? We're going to make sure they don't get away with it, she replied, her gaze fierce. I've already contacted the authorities. But we need to act quickly. I've been gathering evidence, and now it's time to take it to the next level. Lily's plan was simple, but it required precision. She had already documented every transaction, every forged signature, every fraudulent loan. Now, it was time to turn that evidence into action. We need to contact the victims, Lily explained. The elderly people whose accounts Dad and Vanessa drained. They need to know what happened to their money, and we need to make sure they can get it back. I'm going to send them anonymous packages, complete documentation, proof of what happened to their accounts, instructions on how to file complaints, and contact information for legal aid. My heart clenched as I thought about the elderly people who had lost everything, trusting Jared and Vanessa with their savings. I didn't know how much they had lost, but I knew it had to be more than I could imagine. Their futures had been stolen, just like ours. And now, Lily was working tirelessly to return what had been taken from them. But we can't just stop there, Lily continued, her eyes narrowing. We need to make sure Vanessa and Dad face consequences. And the only way to do that is by building a case. I've already filed a fraud alert with the bank, and sent a report to the State Banking Commission about Vanessa. But I'm going further. I've found a way to track the money they've stolen, and I'm going to report it to the authorities. I sat there, listening to Lily as she outlined her plan, and for the first time since Jared had left, I felt a sense of hope. She was taking control, refusing to let her father's betrayal define us. And more than that, she was ensuring that justice would be served. She wasn't just protecting us, she was protecting everyone else Jared and Vanessa had hurt. But as much as I admired her determination, I couldn't ignore the fear that gripped my heart. This was dangerous. Going up against Jared and Vanessa was no small feat. There would be consequences. There already had been. But Lily wasn't afraid. She was so much stronger than I had ever realized. We need to be careful, Lily, I said, my voice shaky. This is bigger than we think. What if they retaliate? What if they come after us? I'm not worried about them, Lily replied, her voice calm but resolute. I've already covered my tracks. And I'm not doing this alone. I've contacted the right people, the right organizations. We've got the evidence. Now, we just have to make sure the authorities act on it. I nodded, knowing there was no turning back now. This wasn't just about recovering what we had lost. This was about ensuring that Jared and Vanessa faced the full weight of the law. It was about making sure they couldn't hurt anyone else, couldn't escape the consequences of their actions. And as Lily began organizing her evidence, preparing to take the next step in her plan, I realized something. The daughter I had raised wasn't just a child anymore. She was a force that wouldn't stop until she had seen justice done. And no matter how dangerous the road ahead seemed, I knew one thing for sure. Lily was going to see this through. We weren't victims anymore. We were survivors. The morning after Lily's plan was set in motion, I woke up feeling like I was moving through a fog. The weight of everything that had happened, everything Lily had uncovered, seemed almost too much for one person to bear. But as the days went on, it became clearer and clearer that there was no turning back. Jared's betrayal was no longer a secret. It was a battle that we were now fighting on two fronts. One for the recovery of our stolen money, and the other for justice. Lily, as usual, was ahead of the game. She had already sent out the anonymous packages to the elderly victims, along with the necessary documentation to prove that their accounts had been manipulated. She'd contacted legal aid services, ensuring that they had the support they needed to navigate the complicated process of recovering their funds. But even with all her careful planning, there was still the looming presence of her father, and the threat that he would come after us, too. The days after Lily's calls to the bank, the authorities, and the state commission were tense. Every time the phone rang, my heart skipped a beat. I knew that at any moment, Jared could call, trying to twist the situation, turn it all back on us. But despite the pressure, Lily stayed calm. She wasn't like me. She didn't worry about what might happen. She worried about what was already happening. And that focus, that determination, was both her strength and her shield. It was just after dinner on the 4th day of this new chapter in our lives when the first domino fell. We were sitting in the living room, Lily sitting cross-legged on the couch with her laptop open, a mountain of paperwork spread out on the coffee table in front of her. I was reading a novel, but my mind kept drifting to the phone calls Lily had made, the evidence she had submitted, and the realization that things were starting to spiral out of control. I had no idea what we were getting into, but my granddaughter seemed prepared for it all. Then, the phone rang. I looked at Lily, who was already reaching for the receiver before the first ring even finished. "Hello," she answered in her usual steady voice. I couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but I didn't need to. The way Lily's eyes flickered with a mix of curiosity and guardedness told me everything I needed to know. I sat up, instinctively holding my breath. "Yes, this is Lily Bennett," she said, her voice calm, but her tone firm. I could hear the careful precision in her words. "You're calling about the fraud report, correct?" She nodded slightly as the voice on the other end spoke. I could tell it was a representative from the bank, confirming that they had received the fraud report. "Yes," Lily said. After a pause, "I've already submitted the necessary documents. I'd like to know the next steps. When can I expect the investigation to be fully underway?" She listened intently, her fingers tapping lightly on the arm of the couch as she absorbed every word. I could see her processing the information, sifting through what was important and what was simply noise. "Of course. Thank you for your time," she said, her tone polite, but I could sense a finality in the way she spoke. "We'll be waiting to hear from you soon." She hung up the phone, and for a moment, there was silence. I waited for her to say something, but she didn't. She simply turned to me, her expression unreadable. "They've confirmed it," she said quietly, her voice steady. "Dad's accounts are officially frozen. The investigation is starting." I exhaled in relief, though I knew it wasn't over. Far from it. This was just the beginning, and the road ahead would be long and difficult. But it was a step in the right direction. For the first time in days, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, things were starting to tilt in our favor. But then the phone rang again. This time, it was a different number, one I didn't recognize. I could see the hesitation in Lily's eyes as she glanced at the caller ID, but she picked up anyway. "Hello, this is Lily Bennett," she said, her tone professional. I could see her posture shift, a slight change that told me she was preparing for something important. There was a brief silence as she listened. Then, her face went pale. Her hand trembled slightly as she held the receiver to her ear. I couldn't hear the other side, but I didn't need to. I knew from the look on Lily's face that something had gone terribly wrong. "Wait," she said, her voice faltering for just a second. "What do you mean, Vanessa's been arrested?" I stood up from my chair, my heart racing as I saw her eyes narrow, processing the words. "What's happening, Lily?" I asked, my voice shaking with fear. Lily didn't look at me as she continued to listen, but her lips parted in disbelief. No, I didn't know. Are you sure? Another pause. I understand, she said slowly, her voice steady again, but this time with a hardness that I hadn't heard before. Thank you for letting me know. She hung up the phone, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence in the room was deafening. Finally, Lily turned to me, her expression hard as steel. Vanessa's been arrested, she said quietly. The authorities got her. They found the evidence, everything we had. It's over for her. I felt a surge of relief and shock wash over me at the same time. I had no idea how it had happened so quickly, but there it was, Vanessa, the woman who had helped Jared drain our lives, was now in custody. Her role in the scheme was unraveling fast. The authorities had finally caught up with her. But what about Dad? I asked, my voice trembling. What happened to him? Lily took a deep breath, her face grim. It's not over. Not yet. But this is a huge step. Vanessa's arrest means the investigation will accelerate. Dad can't hide from this anymore. But I knew deep down that Jared wasn't going to go down without a fight. He would try to escape, to blame others. I knew my son too well. And while his fate seemed sealed, there was still a part of me that feared what he might do next. Lily turned back to her laptop, her fingers moving quickly across the keys as she prepared to follow up with the authorities. She had already taken the first step in this fight. Now she was preparing for the next. But this time, there was no room for hesitation. This is just the beginning, Grandma, she said quietly, her voice unwavering. We have to make sure that everything that's been stolen comes back. Not just to us, but to the others he's hurt. I watched her, amazed at how someone so young could bear such a heavy burden. But I knew at that moment that Lily had become the one person I could count on to make things right. Jared had stolen from us all, but Lily was taking it back. The storm wasn't over. But at least now, we had the strength to face it. 6 months had passed since the storm had started. 6 months since Jared had walked out the door, leaving behind nothing but broken promises and shattered trust. In those 6 months, Lily and I had been through more than I could have ever imagined, but here we were, sitting together at the kitchen table with a sense of calm I hadn't felt in years. The chaos, the uncertainty, the fear, it was all slowly fading. Not completely gone, but enough for us to breathe again. The phone call from the district attorney's office that morning had been the last piece of the puzzle. It was the final confirmation that everything we had worked for was coming together. After weeks of investigation, evidence gathering, and painstaking attention to detail, the authorities had finally taken action. Vanessa Torres, the woman who had been at the heart of the scam, had pleaded guilty to embezzlement, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit fraud. She was facing a long sentence, and Jared, who had thought he could escape, who had thought he could leave behind the destruction he had caused, was also being held accountable. The most surprising part? The restitution payment that had come through. Grandma, look, Lily said, breaking my reverie. She slid a letter across the table toward me. I could hardly believe my eyes as I picked it up, my hands trembling slightly as I read the words on the page. Restitution payment in the amount of $18,400, issued from the sale of assets belonging to Vanessa Torres. I looked up at Lily, my eyes wide. This is real? She nodded, a small, satisfied smile tugging at her lips. Yeah, it is. They sold her car, some of her investments, her personal belongings. We're getting back almost half of what Dad took from us. And that's just the beginning. There's more to come. I could hardly believe it. All these months I had been living in a fog of disbelief, wondering if we would ever see any of that money again. And now here it was, a tangible sign that things were finally moving in the right direction. It wasn't everything, but it was enough. Enough to give us hope, to show us that justice could still prevail, even after everything we had been through. What about the other families? I asked, my voice thick with emotion. The ones Dad and Vanessa hurt. Lily smiled, her eyes sparkling with pride. Mrs. Miller got $22,000 back. Mr. Hayes got all of his money back. And there are 17 families who are getting something. Not everything, but it's something. Tears welled up in my eyes as I thought about the elderly victims who had trusted Jared. The ones who had no idea that the man they relied on for financial advice had been quietly stealing from them. I had always believed in justice, but this was different. This wasn't just about us anymore. It was about making things right for everyone who had been affected. Lily had worked tirelessly, using her skills and her determination to make sure that the victims of Jared's and Vanessa's crimes got what they deserved. She had been the one to contact the authorities, gather evidence, and even track down the stolen money. And in doing so, she had not only protected our family, but she had also protected others from falling into the same trap. It was a level of maturity and focus I had never expected from a 14-year-old, but there she was, standing tall, having accomplished more than most adults could in a lifetime. "I'm proud of you, Lily," I said, my voice full of gratitude. "You've done more than I ever could have imagined. You've helped so many people." She shrugged, a modest smile on her face. "I just did what had to be done, Grandma. We're not done yet, though. We still have some work to do. There's still the matter of Dad." I nodded. I knew what she meant. Jared's actions were far from over. He was still facing charges, and though his role in the scam had been uncovered, there was still the matter of the restitution payments, the court proceedings, and his eventual sentencing. We both knew that it wouldn't be easy to forgive what he had done, but at least now he would face the consequences. And that was something. Lily leaned back in her chair and glanced at the clock on the wall. "Well, I guess it's time to take a break. I think we've earned it." I smiled, feeling a sense of peace settle over me that I hadn't experienced in a long time. Lily was right. We had earned it. All the late nights, the phone calls, the emails, the reports, it had all led to this moment. We had survived the storm, and now it was time to rebuild. We weren't the same people we were 6 months ago. We had been tested, and we had come through stronger, more resilient. The phone rang again, and this time, I wasn't afraid. I picked it up and listened to the voice on the other end. Another update, another step in the recovery process. But this time, I smiled as I spoke, knowing that we were finally on the right path. As the conversation ended, I turned to Lily, who was already closing her laptop. "We did it," I said, a deep sense of relief in my voice. "We're going to be okay." She nodded, a glint of determination still in her eyes. "We've been through a lot, but we're stronger for it." And in that moment, I knew she was right. We had faced the worst of what life could throw at us, and now, we were ready to face whatever came next. Together. Thank you for following our journey. If you've been moved by this story and want to see more stories like ours, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We're building a community of strong, resilient women who know that the best chapters of our lives are still to come no matter what. Until next time, take care and remember, there's always light at the end of the tunnel.